So to begin, I wish to acknowledge that the land on which the University of Toronto operates is the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. In order to reflect further upon the meaning of this acknowledgement, and also to invite others to reflect in similar ways, I situate myself as a settler of European ancestry who has benefited from the destructive colonial project on this land. This is a project which has worked for multiple centuries to dispossess Indigenous peoples of their homelands, cultures, and knowledges to instead impose settler European lifestyles and values. I've also grown up, as perhaps others of us have, without really reflecting deeply on the importance of land itself. For this reason, today I wish to express my gratitude for the land, for nurturing us and for caring for us, and for the Indigenous stewards and defenders of the land who continue to resist ongoing settler colonialism. I acknowledge my own responsibility to resist and to continually deconstruct harmful colonial narratives, and also to work instead towards responsible, reciprocal, and caring relationships with one another and with the land. So in this spirit of relationship, I am very, very pleased to welcome our speaker for today, Kimberly Todd. Kimberly is a PhD candidate in the Department of Social Justice Education, and her area of study is teacher praxis, dreaming, and decolonization. She will be presenting her research today on the decolonial potentialities inherent in dreaming for the teacher and the classroom, Reawakening the Dreamer. Kimberly, thank you so much for being here with us today, sharing your work, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for joining me today. So I do know it's 6 o'clock. So if you're hungry and you want to eat, like feel free to bring food and eat. So just to sort of situate myself, my name is Kimberly Todd, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. So I am a settler on Turtle Island, and in terms of my positionality, my background is Indian and Pakistani. So my research examines the intersection of dreaming, decolonization, and teacher praxis. And I wanted to begin, so my presentation will take about 40 minutes, and then I'm gonna open it back up for questions. And so I wanted to sort of start off with some definitions of colonization, decolonization, and dreaming, so we're all sort of on the same page. And so one of my favorite definitions I've come across is from a dissertation by Amba Jessida Seppi. And in her thesis, Tracing the Mother Line, Earth Elders, Decolonizing Worldview and Planetary Futurities, Seppi discusses colonization. And so Seppi relies on the work of Indigenous scholars and speaks to the damage wrought by colonialism. So Seppi writes, furthermore, I follow Papas Chase Cree scholar Dwayne Donald, who proposes that colonization is an extended process of denying relationships. Everybody has been colonized. It doesn't matter what color your skin is or where you're from. And I also follow, Seppi writes, I also follow Glenn Aparicio Perry, who's written, we are all colonized by time. It's not like we just colonized Indigenous people, we colonized ourselves first, and that's the problem. And as Robin Kimmerer writes also, we all have to remember things that we did not know we have forgotten. And so I'm starting with these definitions because they really speak to the damage that colonization has enacted and the layers inherent in that. So the next definition I want to begin with is Linda Twai Smith definition of decolonization. So in her book, Decolonizing Methodologies, she says the following: decolonizing, once viewed as the formal process of handing over the instruments of government, is now recognized as a long-term process involving the bureaucratic, cultural, linguistic, and psychological divesting of colonial power. And my particular area of work, I think, is hones in on this psychological divesting of colonial power when thinking about dreaming. And then the definition of dreaming, and so just to clarify, I am talking about nighttime dreams in this. And so Barbara Tedlock's definition is really great in her book, The Woman in the Shaman's Body, Reclaiming the Feminine Religion and Medicine. So Tedlock says, dreaming is a universal experience, one that we may attempt to induce or avoid, remember or forget. It can occur while we are awake or asleep. The waking path consists of guided fantasies known as omens, waking dreams, and visions. On the sleeping side are personal dreams based on everyday events or wishes of the soul, prophetic dreams, archetypal dreams, nightmares, and lucid dreams. And so I want to talk a little bit about what has brought me to this work. And so about a decade ago, I was teaching abroad, and I had this dream where I was sitting on the beach with my friend and her daughter, and this wave came up. And in the wave, there was a shadow of a sea turtle. And the wave crashed down on us and basically washed away, like her daughter was washed away into the ocean. And a week later, I was swimming in Oman, I was snorkeling in Oman, and I actually saw a sea turtle in waking life. And I thought, oh, this is powerful. And so then what subsequently began to happen was I began to have dreams of sea turtles, like all the time. And then in my waking life, I began to see them everywhere. So I remember telling my colleague about this dream about a sea turtle. And as I'm telling my colleague this, there's a bus with a giant sea turtle on it. And it was just seeing it on television, seeing sea turtles in movie theaters, on posters, and then dreaming about it. And so this sort of brought me to this state of a reawakening. It began to shift my worldview, because in this I saw the sea turtle as representing the spirit of the earth and my belonging to the earth in this way. And so a relational transformation began to happen. I moved away from this Cartesian dualism paradigm and one that was inherently more relational. And when I began reflecting on this, having this sort of paradigmatic change brought about by the dreaming, it also began to have, because I was a former elementary teacher, so it also began to have reverberations in terms of my own pedagogy. And so having to have, and all of this I felt was inherently decolonial as well, this shift. And so, and then it began to change how I was teaching. And so when engaging in, when applying, I think, to do my PhD, I thought I need to investigate this further. And so my research questions that have guided this are: can cultivating a relationship with dreaming initiate or facilitate the decolonizing process for the teacher? And how does engaging the teacher in Dreamwork help to decolonize the teacher's praxis in the classroom? And what are the implications of this? So my frameworks, I used an anti-colonial framework, a decolonial framework, and a critical spirituality framework. These frameworks were very pervasive. They basically were pervasive in everything that I did. And so they were pervasive and also very grounding. So I used qualitative research methods. So data collection and analysis, I used the phenomenological method because it really provided me with the depth required to do this work. And I used interviews and focus groups. So I had 4 wonderful participants. So Wendy, a primary teacher in elementary school, Robert, a junior teacher in elementary school, Julia, a high school teacher, the formal background in social justice frameworks, Sana, a college professor and former elementary teacher, also with a formal background in social justice frameworks. And 2 of my participants were racialized and the other 2 were Caucasian. Okay, so this is sort of a visual of my findings. So I'm going to explain this a little bit more. So we have the dreaming and the dream work, and the pink circles represent the dreams and the labor involved in that. And so what I did with my research was, with these 4 participants who were all educators, was I engaged in dream work with them over the course anywhere from 6 months to a year. And I would meet with them every 2 weeks or so. And I asked them to keep their own dream journals. And when we'd meet, we'd talk about their lives, what was happening in the classroom. And then we'd unfold and unfurl the dreams. And in this process, we'd pull out what was some of the key symbolism, what did each of these symbols mean for them in the context of their lives, what were the dreams really trying to tell them as dreamers. And then, and none of that part was used for my data collection because I felt, it's important that if you're going to be sharing dreams like in a research context, that you know what they mean before you do that. So the only data collection pieces were the interviews that I did and the focus groups, which happened sort of intermittently throughout this process. And so what arose from this was that, so there were these 4 main themes that arose. So relationships, and this is primarily human relationships, connection to nature, honoring emotions, and self-empowerment. And so the dreams were actually helping to facilitate a processing of the colonial experience and act as a way in which to reconnect the dreamer to what colonization had invalidated. And so, I mean, in our day-to-day busy lives, we don't have that space to honor the complexity of our relationships. And so, for example, in terms of the relationships, participants would dream about old friends, old colleagues, people from childhood, those who had passed away or crossed over in terms of visitation dreams. And the dreams provided that space to really sort of process those relationships and what was required. In terms of the connection to nature, my study was done in the GTA, so it's sort of so much concrete and pavement. There's not a lot of natural spaces. And so participants would dream about animals and insects, bodies of water, trees. And so in the dreamscape, nature emerged really fully and sort of acted as that sort of sense of reconnection back into the natural world. Then there was also the honoring of emotion. So, participants would think, oh, I thought I dealt with this, but this symbol kept coming up maybe 3 different symbols, but when we unpacked them, it was all the same thing. And it was a way to sort of say, hey, you need to pay attention to this. And this led to self-empowerment. And it's important to note these 3 pieces are not separate. They're actually these 4 pieces are all very interconnected. And the self-empowerment was, the dreams were signifying what needed attention. And so one of my participants was transitioning schools frequently. And so the dreaming made them realize, oh, like I'm stressed about this, so I need to really do that prep. And so they started doing that work. And this really added to their sense of self-empowerment. And so basically, dreams process the colonial experience and reconnect the dreamer to what colonialism has denied. So Dwayne Donald's emphasis on colonization's role in denying relationships is critical to these 4 main themes that emerged in the dreams. This is because it's through these 4 main themes that one can see the role that dreaming plays in reconnecting reconnecting dreamers to these relationships that colonization has invalidated, because we don't have that space. And so now I'm going to pivot to the decolonial potentialities of dreaming. And this came out in the data in 4 ways. So I have the reconnection of mind, body, and soul, symbolic thinking, and the validity of spirituality. And lastly, the reaffirming of multiple worldviews. And that's just a visual for you. And so for this next section, some participants had realizations or epiphanies that were different from each other. So sometimes they overlapped with the 4 main themes mentioned above, and then in other instances, they had different reawakenings from each other. And so the first one was the reconnection of mind, body, and soul. And so Julie and Robert felt that the dreams and the dream work helped to convey the underlying issues related to their bodies in terms of aches and pains, emotions, and root issues around stress. They felt that the dreams provided information to them they were sometimes unaware of, or aware of it maybe to differing degrees. And the dreams act as this interlocutor between mind, body, and soul. And so Julia spoke in depth about this reconnection. She said, I think that so much of what is happening in our unconscious minds is connected to our spirit and who we are and how we feel. And so much of what we are taught to mask those signs, you know, if you have a headache, take some pain medication. If your back hurts, stretch or take a pill for pain. We forget that it is our body telling us something. It's telling us that sometimes it needs work or it needs attention. I think the part of the colonization of the body has disconnected us from that ability to reflect on what our body is telling us. I think dreaming is one of the last places that we can't control. We can't control our dreams. And when we dream about stuff, it's the ultimate connection where we have to listen to what our body is telling us. We can't ignore it. We can't take a pain pill. There was this deep sense of interconnection that engaging in dream work generated. Robert says, being aware of how my unconscious mind is feeding off what I'm going through in my real life gives me an awareness that everything within myself is connected. And so in terms of the implications of this, when engaging in dream work, so dreams act as that interface between mind, body, and soul. The dreams give voice to what the body is experiencing, and they also provide insight into the subconscious. And this could be true for early warning signs of burnout, signals around toxic relationships, indications of people who are untrustworthy, and signs to rest. So for participants, the dreams demonstrated the interconnection of their whole selves, which has beneficial implications for how to navigate their interpersonal lives, colonial schooling, and beyond the classroom as well. The decolonial aspect of this is that it's basically sewing back the Cartesian split in the context of the lives of dreamers. So people are then when they're better able to honor their inherent mind, body, and soul connection, they're also more likely to honor these connections and intersections in others. So this process of reconnecting mind, body, and soul via dream work has potentially positive implications for the classroom as well, because teachers who go through this process are more likely to be receptive to ways that honor these mind, body, and soul connections in their students as well. So the next area was symbolic thinking. So there is this exchange and connection between waking and dreaming life, and thinking symbolically connects the two because that mode of thinking is activated for the dreamer when reflecting on dreams in the external environment. So Robert provides an example of this when he says, in terms of connection, I think more about the deeper symbolism of things. And so you have to also keep in mind that dream work is deeply, deeply symbolic, right? And so you're continually delving into the symbolism unfurled in the dreams, right? And so he says, so if I'm at the lake or something, I have this other thing I can think about. The fact that the lake in my dreams is symbolic of that sense of self. And so thus the inner world and outer world of the dreamer are engaged in this deep symbolic manner. And so the dreamer, by engaging in dream work, unfurls dream symbols and decodes them within the context of their own lives, and thus learns to think in a much more symbolic way. What this means is that in dreams and in waking life too, this symbolic way of understanding the world is carried through from dreaming into waking life as well, right? So people who engage in dream work may begin seeing symbols from their nighttime dreams in their waking lives, and can begin a process of engaging with these symbols in the same way they do in a dream work session. So like in the beginning of the session when I talked about seeing the sea turtle, and I was dreaming about the sea turtle at night, and then I was seeing the sea turtle in my waking life as well, like in that example when I saw the sea turtle on the bus. And so that same, so in this way there is this, the dreaming and the waking life coalesce. So in this way, meaning, connection, and relationality move beyond just the dreams, and this transfers into everyday life. So in this waking and dreaming, basically story is weaved back into place. So the wisdom that comes from dreams is also then available in the natural world and in everyday life. So the decolonial implications of this is the enhancement of symbolic thinking is powerful because, as I said, it weaves story back into place. Thus, the lake in one's dreams and the lake in one's waking life is now threaded together. forming the beginning of a web of connections that is now re-entrenched in mythos. And the relevance of this and the potential implications it can have on settler colonial society and place, I think is fascinating. Next is the validity of spirituality. So participants felt that dreaming helped to reaffirm their spirituality. Wendy has said, sometimes I believe that the reason I'm having these dreams is it's God's way of trying to communicate with me at all times, not just when I'm consciously awake, but also when I'm resting. So I think we're having a closer relationship that is making me more devoted. So another participant reported feeling reaffirmed in their spiritual connection to nature. And this participant also had a precognitive dream that brought comfort in a time of job instability when they were being laid off. This is because of the forward cuts. And so Julia spoke about this. I had a dream, and I didn't realize it was prophetic. I was laying in my workplace, in my work department, and I was laying on the ground, and the lights were turned off, and I was talking to my old associate teacher, and was sitting there, and I was talking about what I should do in terms of the layoff from teaching. And he said, he basically told her to do something else. He said, you should move on from teaching. So the next day after she has this dream, she goes into the school, and basically there was a lockdown where I was actually laying on the ground in my department with the lights off. So then it was very much like this deja vu dream. And so because of this experience, she then actually reached out to her associate teacher who gave her the same advice. So where there is this element where I would have actually never known this was going to happen. She said it wasn't a drill, it was a legitimate lockdown for like 45 minutes. And so there was no way of knowing that was going to happen. And a very key thing was like, okay, I need to address this. And it was really, the dream was really pointing her in a certain direction. And so participants felt that the dream work validated their spirituality. This took a variety of forms, whether it be the sense that guidance was sent from God, or a prophetic or precognitive dream, or even that the dreams and the dream work itself was and is a spiritual praxis. So the decolonial components of this is that spirituality has often been left out of the classroom. It's been ignored and neglected, especially if it does not fall within the confines of organized religion. And therefore, the validity in spirituality via Dreamwork for teachers can provide an avenue for reaffirming this aspect of themselves that has been overlooked, hollowed out, or eradicated due to the colonial logics. And so then the next decolonial reawakening was the reaffirming of multiple worldviews. So through engaging in Dreamwork, participants began to see the value in the reaffirmation of multiple worldviews. And this is because Dreamwork is a very dialogical process, right? So there was me as the dream worker and my participants, and we would, we'd unfurl these dreams and we'd pull out these symbols and what, sometimes what I would associate, let's say like a red wagon, what the meaning of that to me versus the meaning of that to my participant would be very different, right? And so in this way, there was this realization that, we have very different world views, and we were continually coming up against this, right? And over time, participants were actually able to create their own dream dictionaries based on their sessions. And so from this experience and engagement, Robert felt this reaffirmed for him the unique worldviews of the students in his class. So he said, the dialogical nature of Dreamwork shed light on the multiplicity of worldviews inherent in each of us. So this demonstrated to the participants this was akin to teaching a class and having so many different individuals and students in the room, and that each student walked into that room with their own worldview. And this caused participants to reflect on how they needed to make space for multiplicities of worldviews in their classroom. And so when looking at all of this, there was the cumulative outcome of the reconnection of mind, body, soul, symbolic thinking, validity of spirituality, and reaffirming of multiple worldviews was healing. So healing potentialities are embedded in the dreams themselves. And collectively, the four main dream themes I talked about at the beginning, relationships, connection to nature, honoring emotions, and self-empowerment, coupled with empathy and self-reflection, in addition to the unique decolonial awakenings, which are those four. Bring about a unique kind of healing process for the dreamer that is inherently decolonial at its core and also has implications for the classroom. And so this led me to the decolonizing self in pedagogy. And so this study focused on the experiences of the teachers themselves. However, one of the participants also carried their newfound knowledge of Dreamwork into the classroom. So Julia had been teaching the book 7 Fallen Feathers, Racism, Death, and Hard Truths in a Northern City by Tanya Talaga to her students. And in this book, elders refer to grief dreams that brought them a lot of comfort. And initially, Julia would leave these dream accounts out of the lessons. But after engaging in dream work and experiencing the healing aspects of dreams and seeing the validity in them, she began including the dreams into her lesson plans with students. She also, for her engaging in dream work and the study helped to reaffirm Indigenous ways of knowing is valid. And additionally, Julia also had students engage in dream work practices by keeping dream journals and engaging with the dream content. She said that half the class was really excited and the other half was sort of uninterested, but that the half that really enjoyed it felt like the dreams reaffirmed their emotions and their sense of self and made them more confident in their own abilities. Julia said the following about engaging in dream work and how it changed her teaching to a certain extent. Just bringing in diverse voices and diverse knowledge bases in the classroom is part of an anti-colonial approach to education. When students are bombarded only with the dominant culture where dreams are not seen as valid or not really brought into the conversation, and allowing them to get a grasp of other forms of knowledge and what those other forms of knowledge are like dreaming. This is my constant struggle, but also that wish as an educator, to have them hear and see and feel diverse voices of other knowledge forms, which is difficult because dreaming is not really something you can easily bring into the classroom. And so Julia found value in ushering students into their own dream work experience because for her, honoring knowledge forms that move beyond a colonial paradigm, also valued the inner world of students, was both an act of resistance against colonial structures and also provided a pathway of hope towards decolonization. And so having students actively engage in dream work helps students to learn about their inner dreamscapes and acknowledge and find validity in the dreams of others. And so by helping to usher students to acknowledge forms such as dreaming that had been invalidated, students can also begin to heal and decolonize themselves when it's done with the right frameworks. And Julia made sure to anchor her pedagogy in anti-colonial frameworks. Barbara Bain in her dissertation writes about her participant Ismana Carney's perspective on the power inherent in dreaming. The idea that dreaming maintains the power to provide new and return possibilities for human ways of life might also suggest it was never really lost. There is something vital and necessary about the capacity of dreams to offer a recovery process for colonial wounds. So it is in this journey into our own dreams that regenerative possibilities emerge, and many possibilities await us. And integrating dreams and dream work into schooling as decolonial tools and praxis is powerful both for teachers and students alike. And so the cumulative aspect of decolonizing the self in pedagogy was a more loving classroom environment. So basically, engaging students in this work and by teachers engaging in this themselves, they help transform the room into a more loving classroom. Allowing the students the space to engage in spiritual technology such as dreaming gives them the time and space to begin listening to their own indwelling spirit. And in doing so, healing can emerge, and also the capacity for teachers and students to love increases. And so we're here to expand our capacity to love. Love is inherently our source. Dreams are our connection to the entire cosmic web because this web is all love. And so when we sleep at night, our soul decides what we need to help us in our own evolution in the waking world. And thus when we dream, we travel through the cosmic web and bring back what we need. So dreams help us in our spiritual evolution by increasing our capacity to love. By teachers engaging in dream work, they increase their capacity to love both themselves and their students, and creating a more loving classroom. And in the context of a loving classroom environment, the decolonial potentials are endless. And so that's a snapshot. This is just a small snapshot. There's more to this, but and these are some dream dictionaries that I've used in the past that I really like. So Dreamhawk and Anti-Flow. So I tend to type the symbol of the dream into the Google and then Dreamhawk, or the symbol and then anti-flow into Google, and then they pop up. So that brings me to the end. These are my references. So do you have any questions?
Kimberly, thank you so much for sharing your super interesting research. That was amazing. If anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to use the raise hand function or to type it into the chat, and I can relay it over to Kimberly. Maybe to get us started, Kimberly, I made a note here. I was really interested about what you said about dreams being story weaved back into place. And I was just wondering if maybe you could touch a little bit more upon like the sort of weaving of place with dreams.
Mm-hmm. And so I think, so when we unpack a dream and we have these, you know, and for example, these very strong symbolism of, let's say, a tree or a mountain or a lake. And when you unfurl that in the dreamscapes, you're often the center point, right, of that entire dreaming. And so that relationality then emerges. And so, like, maybe, for example, if maybe you talk to a tree, for example, in your dream, and then when you now maybe encounter a similar tree, that same sort of connection, you know, and maybe people will think you're a bit crazy, but maybe you talk to a tree too, you know, and in that way, like there's this relationality and this connection. And the thing about dreaming is when we think about mythologies and dreaming, these are the same sacred landscapes, and they're very much mapped on to each other. And so this you kind of have that same relationality when you foster that connection with in Dreamwork and in honoring your dreams, and that then is mirrored in that when you're in the natural world, it's sort of reflected back. And so you start to see maybe that tree in your dream is not separate from yourself, but also an extension maybe of yourself, and also of a wider sort of cosmic web that's like interdependent and interrelated. And those stories, I think, that can emerge are very personal as well. That's sort of my example.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I do see we have some hands. Kate?
Thank you very much, Kimberly. I actually was invited here by Field Liberty, who had suggested that this might be a wonderful workshop, as I'm a high school teacher here in Ontario as well. I have been doing a master's at Thompson Rivers, and my one professor, Jody Latremouli, I think I'm pronouncing it perhaps incorrectly, she had worked with me, and I tried to implement an interesting assignment for my students in geography, and it was looking at contemplative spaces and places. I love the idea of sort of the decolonialization of how it is that we're looking at our reality using dreams and trying to sort of infuse a more organic and humanistic way of educating. I have struggled with trying to align, I believe, these really important philosophical ideas into curriculum expectations. And this is something that I think is really important. I've tried to massage it as much as I can. Have you maybe tried or spoken to teachers who want to do sort of like a test run case study in like a math class or a geography class or an English class? Because I think this is really important work that we should be trying our best to continue to implement. So thank you. I don't know if my question's coherent at all, but anyway.
Yeah, so so another piece of my study, and this, I didn't show this, I don't have time to show it, but was that idea of what really great teachers do is in part is they hold back colonial time and space. And then they integrate like social justice frameworks, and they will stop time, right? If students not feeling great, they're going to stop time, and they're going to focus on that student, and they're going to try to rupture students out of the four walls of the classroom. And so but the key thing is that's in some ways is survival, right? That's survival in the classroom. And so this is why I see this Dreamwork component as necessary, because we need an educational revolution. It's insufficient to continue to do what we do, and that struggle of trying to get all the curriculum standards in, and even the way in which our classrooms are shaped, right? Like nature is outside of the room. It's not, in no ways is it part, right? The living world is demarcated, it's separated. So, and so this is where I see the role, I think, of spiritual technologies, of being able to sort of delve in, and from that place of living in these spiritual technologies, that we find pathways that basically inherently decolonially heal ourselves and transform ourselves. And then I see that move to being able to transform colonial structures. So this is that pathway, and how we do this. Resistance is always, I think, is the beginning in these instances, but this is why we need more than that. And so, yeah, so this is, my work is sort of early in this, and so, yeah.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. Thank you to you for asking the question. I see Stephen also has a hand.
Hi, thank you very much. I had actually two questions, kind of about implementation, like how this would actually work in the school system, or maybe it doesn't, and you re-envision something different than the schools that we have. So my first question is, assuming that this is, sort of a pan-Indigenous spirituality, and I don't know that, and I don't know if this is from any one tradition, from any one nation, or, sort of a mix of all, or just an imagining. But my first question would be, at what point does this cross over to cultural appropriation? Like for a teacher to do that? I don't know if you want to answer that first, and then I can ask my second question.
Yeah, and so the reason one of the reasons I honed in on dreaming was because you're not taking anything from anywhere else, right? That comes from you. Those are your dreams, and your dreams offer this amazing potential for transformation. And so maybe how you unpack those dreams is, could there be ways in which that could be culturally appropriated? For sure. But I think those are your dreams. So the place you're starting with is yourself, and is yours. And so and that's why when thinking about doing a study, initially what I wanted to do was do Dreamwork with teachers, and then go into classrooms and do Dreamwork, have those same teachers do that Dreamwork with the students. But this was going to be way too long, like that, just not possible in the scope of a PhD. So, but it's, you're working with your own sort of sacred landscape, and that's yours. And so I think, are there ways in which it could be, you could be utilizing cultural appropriation? Yes, but I think and that's why the frameworks are important, right? Like using an anti-colonial framework, using a critical spirituality framework. And some of my recommendations have been, like in Teachers College, I think it's essential that we teach anti-colonial frameworks. Like that is necessary. Also for teachers' own sense of being okay and well-being, because there's so much toxicity, I think, in the system. And so so I think those frameworks help to ground in a way that you're not enacting harm on others, and those dreams are your own. So
thank you. If it's okay, that it kind of leads into my next question that I wanted to ask. Is that all right?
Sure.
So the other question I had was, this sounds very much like the invocation of religion or spirituality when we talk about the sacred, spirituality, symbolism, prophetic dreams. And I'm just wondering, like, the challenge that I see is that we have a secular school system that does not permit the imposition of any religion. And we also live in a society where we have people of many different faiths, some of whom are quite religious. And doing something like this, for example, might be against certain religious doctrines. So how do you do that? Or do you see this as basically taking, as part of the decolonization, getting rid of the secular system and replacing it with this new sort of spiritual realm?
That's a good question. So dreams, even within a religious context, are very prevalent. I mean, I've read somewhere about how many dreams are in the Bible, and the number was huge. Actually, I was sort of startled by it. And so this, I guess, in terms of and I can definitely see, of course, people are going to feel maybe threatened by, but it's like, but I mean, dreaming is a part of our everyday lives, right? We all dream, and there's a very, very tiny percent of the population that doesn't, but that's a part of our everyday lives. And so like denying that is deeply problematic. And so how do I anticipate people? How do I think sort of this Cartesian dualism, it enacts so much harm. We're in a time of climate change. Like there's an urgency to shifting our relationality, particularly with the planet, and our collective survival is dependent on. I don't think we can afford to not embrace our dreams. I don't think that's something we actually can afford to do, and that we need to really revolutionize our education system, because it's enacting a lot of harm in its current formations. And so that's sort of what I see is at stake. And so how do we do this? I think the first step is we start valuing our dreams as a very beginning place. And I think what that can do is really has that potential for decolonial transformation, and to take into consideration where we're at right now. Can we afford to not change our relationship to this planet? I don't know. I don't think we can.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Is that all right, Stephen? Sorry, did you want to say something?
No. I've taken up a lot of time. I should make room for everybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I see Hiba.
Hi, first of all, Kimberly, fantastic presentation. That was very interesting. I learned a lot. And I mean, before my question, I just wanted to, if I may, like contribute a little bit to the last question that was asked. I think that dreaming and dream interpretation is a big part of a lot of religions, a lot of faiths. Like, for example, being of the Muslim faith, I know somebody who literally has a book of like dream interpretations. I had a dream once with animals in it, and I needed somebody's input. So she pulled out her book and she tells me, oh, this is what this might mean, this is what this might mean. So we're always seeking meaning, and I think a lot of people use religion and faith to, like, you know, to seek to find some understanding. But what I wanted to ask actually is with regards to dreaming with regards to trauma, or dreaming with regards to, for example, it could be like post-traumatic stress disorder, or even complex post-traumatic stress disorder if it's like childhood trauma. I don't know, I mean, this may not have come up specifically within your study, but I'm wondering, you know, if it did come up, and if it didn't come up, what your thoughts are, because like I know that under the medical sort of understanding, part of like PTSD sometimes is nightmares, right? So a persistent sense of like distress, both in your waking life and in your dreaming life, right? In the form of nightmares. So what would be sort of, yeah, I'm just wondering what your insight around that is.
So yeah, I've heard of, and I think these would be like, for example, Jungian analysts or what have you, who, and I've just heard about this sort of laterally. It's not necessarily my area of specialty, but I've heard of them working in places like in refugee camps, or dealing or with children who've gone through war and who've encountered a lot of trauma, and how crucial that Dreamwork from a professional in these contexts is in their own healing process. Even I heard recently about this. It was an app, and they use this with university students to deal with their nightmares. And I don't know if it was a method where they and I'm not exactly sure, but they found that even just using this app really helped them sort of deal with their nightmares. So a trauma, when dealing with trauma, that's a particular kind of case. But if you in most instances with nightmares, actually, it's your subconscious trying to get your attention. So it just is sort of, it ups the ante because you're not listening. And so it brings in things. And so oftentimes, and I'm someone who actually, most of my entire life was just nightmares. I would just have nightmares. And until I actually had that sea turtle dream, that's when it shifted. But prior to that, I was scared to go to sleep because all I lived with was nightmares. And when you start to unpack those nightmares outside of having experienced trauma, they're actually not scary. The meanings behind them, they're not at all scary. They've just become scary because of the lack of attention. And even for students, I think, who would be like, it's for sure. And there are instances where there would need to be maybe like Jungian analysts or professionals to help with that. But not doing the work is also dangerous, I think, in terms of those nightmares haunt you. It haunt your day, right? Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly and Hubert, for the question. Troy, I see your hand. I also see your question in the chat. Are you?
Yeah, I think it's a question. Thank you, Kimberly. It's a great presentation. I too am doing a PhD, and it's a similar work. Our work, I talk a little bit about dreaming. So I was curious as to the critical spirituality framework. Like it's the first time I've heard about it, and I was curious as to what it says and who has written about it.
Yeah, and so the critical spirituality, so a lot of it I've seen, and unfortunately their last name, I think their first name is Michael, but their last name is escaping me at the moment. So a lot of this sort of originated from the United States, and the spirituality that was taken up by Black folks in a church context in the States, and how this led to liberation. And so the critical spirituality framework is anchored around how spirituality, when taking into consideration oppression and what that does to people, like, and because I mean, in most cases, spirituality doesn't take into consideration anti-oppressive frameworks, right? It's I mean, when we look at the New Age spirituality and things like that, there's no accounting for that. But the critical spirituality framework takes into consideration the way in which people have been oppressed, and how anchoring to spirituality can help to create these like resiliency and strength, and how it can help to transform these structures. I think is it Michael? It might be Michael Dauntly, who is the father of it. So if you give me maybe a minute, you want me to find out for you?
Sure, that'd be good. Okay.
I think, if I'm not mistaken. And if you want, I can send you some articles on it. If you maybe send me your email.
Email, yeah, okay, that'd be great. How should I do that?
Because I have some great, I think it's Michael E. Dauntly.
Okay.
The power of critical spirituality to act and reform. So he was one of the main scholars,
right,
who really talked with us, and even Professor Wan also, obviously her work on spirituality as well. Yeah, so Michael E. Dauntly.
Michael E. Dauntly. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and so if I could, I don't know, somehow, maybe Lois, if you could pass me on the email.
Oh, so I'll just put it in my email. I'll just put it into the.
Oh, okay, perfect. And I can send you some great pieces.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Yeah, you can just send that in the chat. And thank you for your question. And Kimberly, I see Stephanie has the hand up.
Hey, I'm so excited for your work. Thank you so much for sharing, especially within an elementary context. I can definitely weave a lot of this in as I'm bringing a lot of practices while I'm doing my master's at OASI in decolonization. So I'm very excited. I was wondering what kind of dream frameworks, you mentioned that you were working with someone who is trained in Dreamwork, I believe, or were you doing it yourself? I'm just wondering kind of what oh, good for you. I'm just kind of wondering what tools, because I'm also doing a mindfulness stream. And so this kind of that waking mindfulness piece of it, if there was resources that you might be able to share with me that I could dig into. I do, I am familiar with like lucid dreaming techniques, and I'm trying to build some of that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to guide myself in this direction to bring it to my students. Thank you.
Yes. So I use these two dream dictionaries. So Dream Hawk and and Anti-Flow. And so that was sort of the place I started. And so I would just type in so I keep a dream journal. So keeping a dream journal is really important. And then you can sort of pull out that symbolism and see what pops up. And then from there, figure out what is like resonating with you. And then from there, you can begin to sort of unpack. When you sort of place all of those symbols alongside each other, you start seeing a picture form. And you can start, and so basically the feeling when you got it right, it's like a key kind of turning into a lock. You get that feeling like, this is what this is about. And so, and it takes some time. Sometimes you need to sit with the dream for a little while. It's just sort of about that like resonance. And when you start to sort of unpack this over time, you can actually create your own dream journal, because you'll realize what certain things symbolize to you and their meaning. And so, and then when you start unpacking each of the dreams, oftentimes they create sort of an arc, because there's something you're needing to work through. And so, and when you and it moves quicker, like when you unpack that dream, it moves, the quicker you kind of get that realization, then the arc doesn't need to continue anymore, because, you're dealing with this. Right now you're conscious of this. It's moved from that unconscious to the conscious. So I'll give you an example. I I had a dream about two men wearing like blue coveralls in a glass cube, and there was water kind of flowing back and forth. And I was actually in the dream, I was at the funeral of one of the men because he died in the dream from exposure. And in the dream, in the funeral, we were so devastated by his death. And I thought, what is this about? And so I started to unpack some of this. So the water really speaks to like really powerful and traumatizing like emotions, like the overwhelmingness of emotions. The glass, it's seemingly from the outside inescapable, but on the inside it's not escapable. The coveralls were the same color as the water. And so what I realized was what this dream was about was the mental health crisis that we're experiencing, and how I didn't realize I was really carrying that with me, and the tragedy of it, and maybe also the impetus to do something about it. And so that dream symbolized that. And when I realized that, it was like, it was like an aha moment. And so you sometimes have to play with it to figure out what's really going on here. And sometimes you have to give it a couple days before, but it will, once you start to like unfurl some of that symbolism, it becomes easier over time. It just gets easier.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think it really adds to the conversation about decolonizing our own minds and decolonizing our own spirits and taking it back. Because when you talk about working through it on your own and finding the symbols and how it connects to your personal lived experiences and your meaningful connections, it's not about appropriation necessarily. Then if you're going out and asking or researching in the world, and that's adding to your collective cultural capacity of knowledge and wealth, which is great. So other than the fact that we do need an overhaul in order for this to be our guiding sense of education, I think implications for teachers, as we had mentioned, how do we work this into different subject areas? It would be interesting maybe when if we were to start posing questions for different units or themes and putting up images, and then speaking about something like when we talk about space and geographies, and like we're going to design something soon, so start putting up images. Like I wonder if that would be a way in where we could add subconscious sensory items, whether it's talking or smelling, and get students ready. It's almost like a gifted program. You could do it with a gifted program very easily because you're guiding the students, but that really sheds some great light on it. Thank you so much, and good luck with all of this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that question and comments. And thank you, Kimberly. I noticed that we're at our time. This has been such an engaging discussion. It would be lovely to continue, but I think we should probably wrap it up. So yeah, thank you again, Kimberly. Thank you everyone for engaging. I'll leave it to you if you want to say kind of some final words.
Thank you everyone for basically spending time with me today. My mom was sort of affronted when I told her it was happening at 6, and she was like, "Oh, it's dinner time." But so thank you for spending your dinner time with me, and it's been lovely. And thank you for all the questions and encouragement. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you again. And I'm going to put some links into the chat for anyone who wants to attend some more events that are coming up soon. And you'll be able to find this recording at CIER OAZ within the next little while. So yeah, thank you again, everyone, and wishing you a lovely evening.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.